Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Talking Acquisition. This is the weekly high-energy, informative, and slightly opinionated view on all things acquisition, procurement, and government contracting related. This is the place where the contracting and acquisition communities, our industry partners, and our overall community connect, talk, listen, and learn from each other. My name is William Randolph. I am your host, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, my colleague, my partner, and dear friend, Soraya Carrera. Hello, Soraya. How you doing today?
Hi, Will. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Excited for today's conversation.
Excellent, excellent. I know we're like doing this at the end of the day, so we're starting out a little low energy, but we're going to pick it up
We'll get
because
there.
we always get
there.
into the
We
topic.
always get there. That's right.
All right. Well, let me do a little podcast disclaimer, and then I'll introduce our topic. Okay. So our podcast shares information and views on a variety of topics that impact the federal acquisition community. Our goal is to provide thought leadership and perspective, not to criticize, judge, or render political opinions, although we do slip up every now and then. We provide this free service because we are former federal acquisition professionals and leaders. We believe that the creativity, innovation, and effectiveness of our community is unleashed when we share knowledge, information, and learning. We hope you enjoy our podcast, and we welcome the views and comments of our colleagues across the public and private sectors. And so with that, I think this is a perfect time of year to talk about strategic sourcing. Why would I think it's the perfect time of year? Well, we just got a budget. Hopefully it's now been delivered to every agency and everybody's making decisions about what to buy and how to buy. And of course, strategic sourcing plays very heavily around this time of year because you have now shortened the year into basically 6 months. And so some of the buys, you're going to have to go tap existing contract vehicles, whether they're best in class contracts, strategically sourced contracts, agency-wide buys, whatever those vehicles are. But I want to focus on strategic sourcing. I want to talk about category management because that's a little bit different. Even though some people try to mix those two together, I don't.
Not the same.
Category management is a totally separate topic. It's about what you buy and how you buy it. We're going to talk about strategic sourcing and why these vehicles exist. And some of the benefits, we know what the benefits are, right? The benefits are that you should be getting better prices. You're probably going to get competition throughout the life of the program, yada, yada, yada. We know this. But there are some downsides out there. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to let you open up if you'd like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I know this is going to get you.
Well, first, I just had to do like full disclosure. I am a total fan. Having been an HCA that is responsible for getting requirements executed and dollars in the books, strategic sourcing is absolutely a strategy that is necessary and effective. One of the tools that are necessary in the toolbox to get things done throughout the course of the year. Along with that fandom is also the ability to, when they are structured and targeted in specific areas, highly effective ways to get your small business goals situated. If you have strategic sourcing vehicles that are focused toward a socioeconomic category, maybe like veterans or women-owned or something unique in the 8A space or HUBZone. I've seen some amazing things happen in strategic sourcing when they're not only focused on the requirements, on the set of requirements and offerings, but then they take those and target them towards a socioeconomic category that so an organization may have had trouble getting their goals. So you're killing two birds with one stone. You're getting efficiency as well as targeted. So I think it's the valuable approach. My critiques always come when I think about when small businesses occur, and the phrasing that I'll use is situationally competitive, meaning that we identify these pools of individuals or groups of companies at one point in time, and that we have, if off ramps are actually provided, those on ramps are done annually, perhaps when the pools are reset. So if someone shows up in week 7, in month 7 or 8 and wants to participate, they have to wait until the on-ramp time happens to get an opportunity to even participate. There's no guarantee that you get on during an on-ramp time, but there's always a certain time frame. Even if one is available, there's a certain time frame. And I always just wonder if that is somehow suppressing the competitive market forces that are in the, that are in the environment. So that's one of my, I think if I have a critique, that's probably the largest that I have.
So no, and you raise a really valid point, and it's a topic of great discussion. You hear small businesses talk about, especially these days with best-in-class contracts, right? Where it's even, the opportunities are bigger, right? The pools are bigger, and companies, when they're left out, they feel like, well, now I'm never going to be able to do business because these people are going to control, and everybody keeps going in that direction. So when I think of strategic sourcing, the first thing I think about is it's two or more. That's the way I always describe it: two or more. Two or more entities come together to buy something that they share in common, whether that's training or professional services or IT software, you name it. It's that two or more entities got together and decided, here's what we're going to buy. And I'm a huge fan of strategic sourcing because it does yield, I think, better prices, better solutions when properly negotiated. Where I think the weakness is, and you did a little Freudian slip, is the off-ramp. On-ramps are great, but if you're not getting anybody off the damn vehicle, then you're going to have a GSA schedule, right? I mean,
good point. Good point.
Right? If you just keep on-ramping, then you're going to end up with a gazillion companies. And I've never been a fan of any vehicle that has, say, more than 10 to 20 companies, depending on the size of the vehicle. And the reason for that is because I think it doesn't make it lucrative for a company. In other words, if I have 50 companies on a $100 million vehicle, then they're dividing that pot, if you will. Right?
Small slices.
The slice is smaller, the opportunity is smaller. So I'm a huge fan of limiting strategically sourced vehicles to that right number, whatever that right number is, given what your requirement is, right? 10 to 12 companies, maybe no more than 20. But when you start getting upwards of 20 companies, you start getting unwieldy. And here's what really happens. When you award to that many, a lot of them won't bid on the individual tasks. And this is where my off-ramp comment comes in. I've long held that I think companies should be required to bid, I don't know, on all of the requirements that come up, or most of I don't know how you do it, right? I'm not going to tell you the formula. But I think that if companies are not bidding, they should be thrown off the contract, because you didn't get the contract so you could wave it around and say, woohoo, I got a contract.
To sit on it.
No, that's not what it's for. You're to demonstrate work and that you did something, and you're supposed to be accomplishing something. So I am a fan of the off-ramp, and that needs to be done intelligently. It should be based on performance, their ability to bid and successfully bid. Doesn't mean they're going to win everything, but are they bidding? Are they trying to win, right? And if they're winning work, are they performing well? Because why do you want a company on a contract that isn't performing well, right? You should boot them off if they can't get it done. And I think if you have off ramps, then it's easier to do on ramps, because you're kind of purging and cleansing, right? That's really what it should be. The best players come to play. I will tell you that I've lost that argument so many times, because people think off ramps are really hard to do. Companies are going to challenge you. They might protest, wah, 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 wah. And, I always get that typical line. I'm like, I don't care. Lay the cards on the table.
It's evidence-based.
The circumstances, right? You're the circumstances.
Right.
And you can either be in it and win it, or you're out. Sorry. That's
I love
the way I see the world. So, but I am a fan of strategic sourcing. I think it's been a savior in many instances, especially in large agencies. I think of like where we came from, I should say, DHS or DOD or DOJ, big agencies.
Absolutely.
Benefit from it, because very typically there are going to be two or more organizations that are probably buying the same thing. Places where I really looked at strategically sourced buys, IT software, hardware, services, a lot of especially like we call it desktop support services, those general professional services. I think
Sure.
it's a great area. And you brought up a really good point, targeting for small businesses. So one of the things that I thought we did very well at DHS very early on was we partnered to make sure that we included small
Right.
businesses. So
Yeah.
like if you think of our Eagle, remember our big Eagle
I do.
procurement, and you think of First Source was 100% small business set aside. Eagle, we had tracks for small business.
Mhm.
And later on, we even developed tracks by types of small businesses, by categories of small businesses. And we've always kind of done that. We had PAX, which was targeted for service
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
veteran-owned smalls, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a smart way for agencies.
Absolutely.
Everything doesn't have to be a
Absolutely.
best-in-class vehicle. We can do strategically sourced vehicles, and we can target and include that small business community. But I think the on-ramps and the off-ramps has to apply, even in
Yeah.
those small business instances. It can't be, oh, well, you got the contract, you can hold on to it for the next 5 years, because we can't do contracts for less than 5
Yeah.
years. Sorry, that's my other pet peeve, you know that. But anyway, you have to have a contract for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Even if you don't bid. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
If you're not playing, if you're not bringing something of value to the agency, you buy big dating game kiss.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's not badges. Contract awards aren't badges that you just put on your uniform. Yeah. So
Exactly.
I'm excited for a couple of things. The first is I started on the supply side of the conversation, and you started on the demand side of the conversation, which I really love. So I'm going to come and join you on the demand side and talk about when we have the demands, how strategic sourcing vehicles can actually be helpful. And I think the first piece of that, I'm going to go upstream one step and talk about your spend analysis. When an organization, your strategic sourcing vehicles should be informed by the spend analysis, not just because it's cute to put some contract together. We should be looking at the spend and saying, what are we spending an inordinate amount of time, our administrative time on doing transactionally one at a time? Look at that spend and see if there's an opportunity to do something at an enterprise level, even an enterprise within an organization. And then especially to your point, when you have, like we have at DHS, you have multiple buying activities within one family, you can look at the spend across the department and say, wait a minute, for the organizations, for the HCAs that are responsible for deploying talent to do transactional activity, you only have so many sets of hands and brains. You've only got so many sets. So what can you use to get the greatest ROI out of the hands and the heads? And that is, I believe, on the demand side, is looking at the spend, analyzing your spend, seeing where there's commonality and compared with the administrative effort to get it done. And those are ripe targets. They should be like just blinking neon signs to say, hey, this is an opportunity to aggregate that demand and build you a contract, build you some contracting mechanism, some strategic sourcing type mechanism to deliver on that. I think that's one of the additional things DHS did really well is, I believe, the demand was used to inform the type of contracts. It wasn't just, oh, let's just go build something over here and let's go build something over there. We took the demand of the organization and said, oh, the HCAs could use help here deploying the finite amount of capacity that they have to deliver value through the strategic sourcing vehicles.
So I 100% agree, spend analysis. And right now there are tools out there. I mean, you can use artificial intelligence. There's a gazillion tools that do this. But one of the things that we also did in the early days of DHS, and we've continued it on, we've changed the name of it every now and then, but it's still the same thing. Not only did we do the spend analysis, but then we created commodity councils or category councils, right? Mm-hmm. A council of the people that buy these things, right? Based on the spend, whether it was ICE, CBP, Coast Guard, whatever. And we put them together in a room and said, now take a look at what you buy and see if you can homogenize your requirements. Because part of the problem that you see and why strategic sourcing, when they do it right, what people find out is Well, we're kind of like having one-offs, and that's why we're paying different prices.
Yeah.
That's a very common
Absolutely.
argument,
Yeah.
right? That
Absolutely.
you're buying the same software, but he's paying $300, that one's paying $200.
With no visibility.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Get your
that
lunch
spend
easy.
analysis has to be not just about the commodity, but what are you paying for it?
Yeah.
What are you buying? What is the product that you're buying? What are you paying for it? And why are you paying those prices? And then can we consolidate on those requirements? Can
Yeah.
we reach agreement? And there are times sometimes that some of them will say, well, I really got to have XYZ until they see the price break that you get in a good strategically sourced contract.
Yeah.
So I agree. The spend analysis is critical. It's essential. It is what informs whether or not you're going to do a strategically sourced vehicle. And it also helps you inform your requirements. It really does. Because sometimes our requirements are based on what we know,
One-offs.
not what everybody else is doing, right? What is the common ground? Commercial buying, for example, right? Sometimes those little subtle nuances drive your prices up. The other thing that I would say is today, now in this era, where we have AI and machine learning and RPA and blockchain technologies, and you name the technology, it's easier than ever to do those spend analyses. And you can do it quickly, effectively, and put contracts in place pretty quickly. Because most of the stuff that you're going to buy strategically sourced is going to be commercially available stuff. It's going to be your commercial products and services. I remember when we were doing this in the early days of DHS, because I did one of the first handgun procurements. Buying handguns for the agents. And it wasn't all the components that used handguns. Some of them couldn't participate in the buy because they used something very different. But we were able to consolidate, and we were able to award to not only large businesses, but small businesses.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of value. There's a lot of value to strategically sourced contracts. Say that 3 times real fast. But we also have to be careful because you could be leaving out small businesses.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
you could be minimizing or limiting competition in some cases.
Yeah. I think that's a fair critique. What you brought up is this. What I like to make the distinction between market research and market intelligence is that market intelligence is the knowledge of the environment and how if you get informed about the environment, it changes the buy. It influences the buy. So that I think that market intelligence is really critical. It's a critical piece to the strategic sourcing conversation. And I just encourage any organization that's thinking about that, get really smart about your commodity, about your goods and services. Get your knowledge up, because that knowledge will inform how you go build the vehicles. Question. Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, I was going to add one thing. One of the things that, and you heard me say it, it's one of my pet peeves, is that we try to write every contract to be 5 years. We're like wedding to 5 years. If it isn't for 5 years, the world's going to come to an end. And I would argue, and I have argued, you don't know what's going to happen beyond the next 2 to 3 years, especially when we talk about technology.
Technology, absolutely.
So this goes to the whole speed up the buy. Why do you have to write that contract for 5 years? And companies are going to go, well, the companies that win are going to say, well, if you give me a 5-year contract, I'm going to give you a better deal. Yeah, right. I come from the school of thought, we should be doing 2 to 3 year buys at most. You do it for a couple of years and write a contract, for Christ's sake. Stop with the freaking IDIQ. I'm sorry, it just drives me nuts. Write a contract for a change, especially when you talk about business. But write a couple of year contract, maybe with an option for 1 more year in case you run into trouble in the recompete, but recompete earlier. Figure out how we do these contracts faster. We got to get these awards done faster. We write 5-year contracts and now 10-year contracts and 15-year contracts and 20-year contracts. Not because they should be. There are some instances, right? You're going to buy data center, of course, make that a 10-year, 15-year contract, because you're not going to move out of a data center overnight if you're even doing data center or cloud, right? You're not going to be moving your applications every other day. I got that part. But stuff like buying software, really? I got to write a 5-year contract to buy commercially available software? That's nuts. It's crazy.
Absolutely. When it's going to cycle every 6 months anyway.
Exactly. And it's the same thing, with your certain services. I get it. You don't want to change contractors every other day.
Yeah.
But you know, that little house cleaning is good. Companies do become complacent. People become complacent.
Yeah.
And we should be buying services, and we should be getting the very best possible services, and we should be promoting competition. Again, I'm not saying every year, but about every 2 to 3 years, we should be recompeting requirements, especially what I call commercially available services,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where, because if not, you start to stalemate on your prices, and you don't always get what I would call the best optimal service. You might not be getting the best innovative approaches or the best practices to doing something, because we become complacent. We become used to what we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there is a internal push whenever there's a new contract. Everybody gets fresh. The program office thinks about the buy. The contracting office, the contracts team think about new ways of buying. And why should we be doing that every 4.5 years? You know,
Exactly.
every 4.5 years is the formal push to reimagine your business. We should be thinking about that in way sooner increments than every 4.5 years. It's like, okay, what's out there now? It's been 4.5 years. It's time to recompete the thing. This is the time we start thinking about new strategies, new approaches.
But you got to simplify the recompete. You can't ask a vendor to spend the next 6 months writing.
Oh, agreed. Oh, wholeheartedly.
You got to simplify it, right? You can't be sitting here going, oh, well, you know, I want to analyze and evaluate how you dotted that I and cross that T. Didn't make a friggin' difference.
Yeah.
Look at the company's past performance, look at their capability to deliver, focus, do a challenge, do a technology challenge, have them come in and do oral proposals, simplify the buy. Get in and out of that whole process in a month or two, not 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
If you make it overly complicated, of course, everybody's going to want to do 5 and 10 and 15-year contracts. I can't tell you how many program officers will go, I need 10 years.
Right. Because they don't want to go through
I
the,
don't want to be here
for
for the next one.
Right.
Hell, I, as a contracting officer, a couple of times said, I don't think I want to be here for the next one, right?
Yeah, agreed.
So you got to simplify the buy. And that was, you know, something that I've always pushed. I think we got to be a little smarter about how we do commercial buying. I still think we overcomplicate the buy with our eval factors. And are we really getting better deals when we complicate those buys that way?
Yeah, I agree. You know, I tend to hear the economic ordering justification when you do strategic sourcing. Go big. You get the first value proposition that's put on the table is the economic ordering savings. But I wonder, in the process of going big, you almost nullify that, because it may be only a few participants that can participate big. So I believe it may have a unintended consequence of chilling competition a bit, because of the requirement gets so voluminous, to your point, of a 5, 8, 10-year contracts.
Exactly.
When we put companies on contract for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, they have to go get ready to be on a contract for 5, 7, 8, 10 years. Those are investments that are made to be ready, because woe is the company that's not prepared, and the government in year 7 says, let's go, we need more. Okay, exactly. The one that's not prepared. So they have to get prepared. So I just wonder, when we ask large, we have to make sure we're knowledgeable and aware, eyes wide open, of what asking big really means for industry.
Well, and the other thing that we have to consider is that the way we're structuring some of these contracts, because they are IDIQs, and if you ever looked at some of these minimum quantities, like $250 for a $1 billion contract.
One item.
Yeah, I'm giving them big. You know, I want some companies to call me and tell me those big discounts they gave for $250 guaranteed. Come on, you're not getting anything. And which takes me back to, again, one of my other mantras, which is, come on, folks, we got to write real contracts at some point, right? We got to really either, you know, put some pedal to the metal here. An IDIQ, that minimum guaranteed quantity is supposed to be sufficient to
Meaningful.
energize a company to give you good prices.
Yeah,
The
meaningful.
reality is what they're doing, they're just out shooting each other on pricing. You're probably not getting a good price from any of them sometimes.
Exactly.
Or you're getting substandard quantity. And I think when you do that, I think in commercial products, when you talk about supplies, equipment, I think that's a little bit easier to discern than in services.
That's fair. That's fair.
In
Because there's people
services, I
behind
think-
those.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's people
And
behind
no
those.
two people are the same. And the qualification requirement, you can lay down.
Tight
all the
labor
qualifications.
market.
You know how many educated idiots I've worked with?
Oh, not racist.
I couldn't resist saying that. And how many uneducated people without degrees who were
Yeah,
brilliant,
highly competent.
brilliant,
Yeah.
way better than the next PhD. So,
Yeah.
and I don't say that to criticize anyone. I respect degrees and I also respect experience.
Yeah.
But that's the common denominator that we try to go to, and we try to pretend that because you have a bachelor's degree and 5 years of experience, you're all the same. It doesn't
Yeah.
work that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. And so I think on the services side, we sometimes do ourselves a disservice, especially when we let it go to a price shootout. Because even in a best value, sometimes we're letting it go to a price shootout.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know,
So,
right?
right.
We're not being able to differentiate enough
Absolutely.
in that trade-off analysis.
Right. In the
So it
non-price factors.
exactly. It starts
Yeah,
to
I
become
got
a
it.
price shootout.
Yeah. And Sarai, I think you landed on something, especially that's especially relevant at this day and age and this time. Look at the labor market that we have today.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Think about the contract that was put in place. This is 2022. Think about the contract that was put in place in 2019.
Yep.
It's literally
The whole-
unrecognizable. Okay. The contract that was put in place in 2019, that the execution started in 19, the
Right.
way the work has to be done today is
Right.
literally unrecognizable.
It's different. And now a lot of the people that you may have been able to contract for in 2019 to go sit on site next to their government counterpart, they're saying, you know
No,
what?
thank
How
you.
you doing it? Thank
Yeah.
you.
No,
Yeah.
thank you.
Dictating game kids.
If you can hire them in a tight labor market, if you can attract them.
If you can attract them, exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
So
now the competition is about something totally different.
absolutely.
Totally
Absolutely.
different.
And I
It's
see it playing itself
flexibility
out.
and the work environment, right? I mean, those conversations are happening on a regular basis
They
in
are.
industry and in government. So, you know, it's one of those things that when I think of strategically sourced contracts, I'm a huge fan of it. I mean, God knows I advocated for it when I was at ICE, when I was at headquarters, when I went to USCIS. I was always trying to identify areas where we could take advantage and put in place strategically sourced vehicles, not because they represented 100% of the buy. And by the way, that was something I always said when I was out talking about strategically sourced contracts, best in class, or whatever other type of contract you want to call it. No one contract is 100% of the buy. They
Yeah.
represent something in that 70 to 80%.
Well, I like that. I like that.
Right? Because there are always going to be unique circumstances where you have to go and do something different and write a separate contract, what have you. So don't give me this mandatory. I don't like mandatory for use, by the way.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows me knows my rule about mandatory. You are my rule
Yeah.
about mandatory for use.
Yeah.
If it's that damn good, you wouldn't be mandating it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And I'll tell you,
Build it, they will come.
as an HCA, that's the worst thing you can run up against, because you need the flexibility to move and adapt
Right.
to your program requirements. So if you've got to go pay homage to some contract vehicle,
Right.
you're often pushing square pegs in the round holes.
I said another way. It's like medicine. Damn good. I'll just take it.
Right.
If I'm not
Right.
taking it, it's probably because it's not good. If
Right.
you
That's a
tell me
sign.
I have to, I'm going to find 1,500 different ways. And by the way, I'm that way. Like,
Yeah.
if you tell me, Soraya, you must, I go,
Oh, yeah.
no.
That's the exact thing that I'm going to work around. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to find a way to work around because it can't be that good if you're telling me I have to.
Yeah.
But I do believe, though, that it is important for folks to think about that strategic sourcing buy and craft it cleverly to fulfill that 70 to 80%, recognizing that you're
Yeah.
always going to have
The anomalies.
outliers
Yeah.
that you're going to need. And think about that a lot when you talk about services. There are a lot of services that are commercially available, easy to buy on strategic sourcing, but you got to simplify the buy. You
Yeah.
can't say strategic sourcing You can't say we're going to make it economically efficient and not simplify the buy. You got to
Yeah.
simplify the buy.
Yeah,
And I
it comes
still
with
see
it.
that we make it way too complex sometimes.
Yeah.
I've read some of these solicitations. I've gotten a few recently where folks, companies that I'm helping out, and they'll send it to me and I go, don't bid this.
Run, Forrest, run.
Run, Forrest. Don't go there. Don't go into the light. No, because I
Right.
mean, by the time you're done, and sometimes the qualification requirements for people, I'm like,
Oh,
really?
sure.
That's
Yeah.
not what they need. Come
Oh,
on.
yeah. Yeah.
Right?
You-
I mean,
the-
isn't that overkill? And even the companies themselves are going, that's like overkill, right? But
Yeah.
they're going to give it to you. They're going to give it to you.
Yeah, please
Because
don't
once
get me
you
started.
say minimum required, then a
Oh,
lot of protests have been won on that one little certification that somebody said, well, they don't really have it, but it's okay. And then they got
Oh
protests.
yeah, don't get me started on those. They
Yeah, we
literally
already
aren't,
talked key
they
personnel.
aren't worth the paper they're written on, especially
Yeah.
in a tight labor market. Anyone that's waiting around, that's waited around for the process to go through and is still going to honor their letter of commitment, you don't want them.
Oh, and by the way, when I say we got to simplify the buy, yes, I do mean we, the contracting community, with the program officers, we got to think strategically about
Yeah, the whole system.
what we're trying to do with these eval factors. What is it that we're trying to achieve? What is it, the benefits that we're trying to get? But I also think we got to simplify the buy from a regulatory perspective. I still stand my ground that we've built so many compliance requirements that don't need to be in there. Just because one person did something wrong doesn't mean everybody's going to do it wrong.
Yeah.
And we built compliance requirements that were based on when we used to build a lot of things, not commercial buys. My pet peeve, cost accounting standards. I don't understand why I got to worry about cost accounting standards in today's commercial market when I'm buying things that are already.
When I'm forced to do fixed price if I'm buying commercial stuff. It's like
Exactly. Right. And just like, the overuse of firm fixed price, but that, you see, I'm starting to go off on something. Because you know how I feel about firm fixed price. Someone somewhere said all the risk is on the contractor on a firm fixed price.
Yeah, not true.
No.
Totally not true. Right.
Totally not true. Yes, from a philosophical standpoint, that's what it's supposed to mean.
Yes.
That's not what really happens. But that's a topic for another day.
Indeed. And with that, we're at time.
Nugget time.
I think we birthed 3 new podcast episodes in this episode.
So I'll give you my nuggets. First of all, I do think we should always think about strategic sourcing. The larger the organization, like the agency, the more elements it has, we should be doing that spend analysis and identifying where we're buying common goods and service and bring those entities together. But you got to bring those entities together. You can't just say, oh, we're going to do it. You have to bring them together so that they can agree on the commonality of their requirements and make sure that the contract accounts if there are one-offs, right? Because you can't write contracts that have the one-offs, okay?
Sure.
So definitely, I think organizations need to be doing a good job of spend analysis, look at strategically sourced, but make sure that you're writing that contract for the right time frame. Don't write it for a time frame because you don't want to go through the competition again. Write it for a time frame that makes sense based on the good pricing you can get, good commodities you can get, the good support you can get, whatever those requirements are, and write it for a reasonable time frame, and then build on-ramps and off-ramps, especially if you're going to write it for a longer period of time. Build those on-ramps, those off-ramps, so that you can get those companies that aren't really bidding off or not being successful off, so you can get companies that can be successful on. And then my last tidbit, you see, I went crazy on the nuggets. And my last tidbit is this. Companies really want to do a good job. We have to help them do a good job.
Yeah, I believe that.
And you just don't write a contract and hand it over and say, here, perform. You got to sit down with them and say, and here are the expectations. And that's true for whatever you buy. So I really think that just because you award a multiple award doesn't mean that you shouldn't have regular and recurring meetings with that team of contractors to talk about what's going well under those contracts and what isn't.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. My nugget is just an extension of the concept around the strategically sourced vehicle, and that is what I call the enterprise contract. It's the little brother. Okay. Instead of looking big inside of any given organization, some shop where you are getting multiple contract actions for the same thing time and time again, look at that spend. And you may, the organization itself, an HCA or director or in some line of business, may be able to say, let's put something enterprise together so we can harvest some of this time, administrative time that is being used to buy the same thing over and over and over and over again individually. Think about from an enterprise. I call it the little brother of strategic sourcing, but it's simply looking at your spend. I'm a big data person. So look at your data and then look at where your organization is spending its time, and then use contract vehicles to harvest time out of the system, because I've never been to the contract shop where they got plenty of people, plenty of hands.
Yeah, we've already had that conversation.
Just waiting around.
They're never overstaffed. They never have a huge budget. Yeah, no, I'm with it.
Yeah.
But I have to add something because I did forgot to mention, and I was surprised that you didn't mention. I left it for you. You didn't go there. Strategically sourced doesn't mean large business. You can have very successful small business strategically sourced vehicles.
Yeah.
So when you're writing these strategically sourced vehicles, don't always think it's got to be large. Maybe you have tracks for both.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But don't leave the small business out, because
leave them out.
many small businesses have done great jobs very successfully on strategically sourced vehicles. So do the homework, do that market research, go find those companies out there, because you're going to find that there are a lot of small businesses that can and will deliver very successfully.
And that's an area where a large part of your nimbleness and creativity will come from. Those small in the garage, doing some little things here and there. That's where the next big idea comes from.
There you go.
And with that,
so we could say go small or go home. I'm sorry.
Indeed. And with that, another great one. Thank you so much. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Will. Always a pleasure.
Take care.
Take care. You too.